if it looks like I'm looking at something, it's because I'm waiting for a thing. So give me a thumbs up or so you can hear me or whatever if you can. Tonight, I had planned to do a update. I had asked Bill Caney to come, and he initially agreed, but he was traveling and some things came up, so he had to cancel out. So I had to decide whether I was going to do the update or not. I apologize for it. So if you don't want to listen to it, since it's just going to be me droning on by myself, I'll try to go over some of the things that Bill and I were going to go over because I think they're fairly important. Most of them focus on Israel. I am monitoring the the Davos meetings. There have been just some, I think, incredibly important sessions. I'm not going to talk about that tonight because I'm waiting through hours and hours of video. I actually sat and listened to Henry Kissinger for an hour today, or about an hour today, which is a real snoozer. So Davos will be Sunday. I may have something to add on a Rumble only thing tomorrow or Friday. I was going to talk about some things regarding the World Health Organization, but that has to be because of the topic. I think that has to be solely on Rumble, and I'm not going to talk about that. So here's just a few things that I think I want to talk about tonight, and there are going to be two things. There's going to be CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, very briefly, and then mostly focused on some developments in Israel that I think are very important, even important enough that I think that there is some risk that the Netanyahu government may collapse in the next few days, and that would be very interesting. And so, if you want to ask some questions, I might have some time for questions. Please type those in all caps, and we'll try to get them to me. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is central bank digital currencies. And by the way, if you hear a buzz or hum or anything, you can let me know in the messages. I'll try to do anything about it. I'm not sure what happened last week. I've changed my setup. I've tested it. And then something went haywire with my midweek update last week. And if you would just pray that these things would go correctly. By the way, in the show description tonight, I've done something that I don't usually do just because of lack of time. And that is, I've put most of the articles that I'm going to refer to, articles and videos that I'm going to refer to in the show notes. So let's get started. And again, if you're just joining in, Bill Canning was going to join me tonight, but that fell through at the last minute just because he's on a busy travel schedule. And that's why I put, when I posted it on Facebook, that he was going to join me if everything went correctly, and everything didn't go correctly. So he's just got home or was on his way home today from out of town, and then he's leaving to go out of town tomorrow. So appreciate his trying to work that out, but it just didn't work out. So anyway, so here we go. And so again, question in all caps, and then type your question in all caps, and I'll try to get to it. So here's the first thing I want to talk about is central bank digital currencies. I think that this is here's an article from the Wall Street Journal the other day. Let me see if I can expand this up a little bit. Go. Wall Street Journal, central bank digital currencies coming whether we like it or not. So these things have been proposed for a while now. The U.S. put in some regulations, the Biden administration last March, that they were going to put in a study for central bank digital currency. There were some people that were reporting that it was going to be rolled out in December, but what they were trying to do when they put the regulations in place was they wanted the central bank digital currency report or efficacy to be reported on by early December. I don't know if that happened, but in November, December, there was a consortium of about a dozen US big banks that started looking at this more on a pilot program with the Federal Reserve to see how that would be, how it would be done. In fact, you can go to there's a website. It's called CBDC Tracker for Central Bank Digital Currency Tracker.org. And you can kind of see the status around the world of the different central bank digital currency programs. I'm not sure that this has been rolled out anywhere. For example, in Russia, they're doing a proof of concept, which is a further stage. So you see up here, it's a research phase, proof of concept, pilot, and launch. So, for example, Canada would be a pilot program. China is a pilot program. India is a pilot program. Other countries are, for example, Australia, the US is in a research phase, Argentina, Brazil is in a proof of concept. So there's different paces at which they're going. Now, there's also this organization that's been formed called the BRIC countries, and they're trying to add more countries to this. So, for example, the BRIC countries right now would be Brazil, B, R is Russia, I is India, and C is China, and they're also called the BRICS, and S for South Africa. There is also some indication that they're trying to bring, I believe, Turkey and Iran into this program. And so you can see that both Turkey and Iran are into the proof of concept phase. And that's kind of important because the BRICS countries right now have a goal of getting rid of the US dollar as a digital reserve currency. And you're going to hear more about that in a little bit of a clip that I'm playing from Caroline Glick in an article that she wrote for Newsweek that just came out today, because I think they're pretty important because they relate to what's going on in Israel, and they also relate to what's going on with the dollar. The one thing that you notice in this world is that everything is interconnected. So when they go to Davos and they're talking about, for example, the main overarching theme of the Davos conference is that we are in a polycrisis, many crises, all happening, all converging, and happening quickly at the same time. And I showed you Sunday some of the global risk report for 2023 that was put out by the World Economic Forum. You can download that, by the way. If I remember, I'll add that link to the show description tonight. But these things are all interconnected. And so, for example, there was a session at the Davos conference about disinformation. And it was interesting. Of course, they had some of the biggest spreaders of disinformation in the world. They had Brian Stelter, who used to be, the kind of angry anchor at CNN. I think he's gone now, but of course he was the person in charge of moderating the panel. And they also had one of the big editors from the New York Times to talk about disinformation. And when Klaus Schwab, in the video I played Sunday, talked about, and somebody pointed this out to me in an email, so I can't remember who it was, so I can't give them credit, but I thought it was a very good point. Klaus Schwab talked about we're in a polycrisis, but we have to get out of the crisis mindset. But understand that to these elites, who I think a lot of them think they're doing good, but I think some of them are doing evil by design, but some of them might actually think that they're doing good. they think that we're in a crisis mindset because people are spreading misinformation about them. So whenever you see the World Economic Forum talked about, immediately you will have people say, "Oh, that's just a conspiracy theory." When Klaus Schwab came out with a book called The Great Reset, and a lot of us started talking about what they wanted to do in terms of a Great Reset, and then certain world leaders like Justin Trudeau said, "We need a Great Reset." When you talked about it, immediately go look at on Twitter. Go follow a thread on Twitter where it's discussed. Oh, you're a bunch of conspiracy theories. It's just a concept that they're talking about. They don't have any plans. They don't have any power or anything like that. But so what you're seeing is that what Schwab says, polycrisis and the crisis mindset, well, we have to change that because we have to change what people are hearing and seeing on social media. And so that's where they come in and say, well, we have to control disinformation. By the way, some good news, I don't know who will replace her, but one of the people who, told us that she was the sole source of truth, Jacinda Ardern, the World Economic Forum trained young global leader who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, has resigned. She says, I just don't have the stamina or drive to continue to be prime minister. So there will be elections. There are going to be elections in October. She's not going to run. She's resigning. And then her party will appoint a prime minister to serve until the elections in October. So I would say that most of us would think that that's good news. And the question is, why is she resigning? I mean, she doesn't have the drive? Is she weakened physically or something? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I have no idea. She just said, I don't have the driver stamina to do it. So back to the central bank digital currencies. So these things are going to come. I don't think they're going to happen overnight. I think there's going to be a transition phase, but understand that behind this, and this is what I'll talk about when I talk about the World Health Organization rules and regulations that they're trying to put in place that would be essentially have the force of law in all of the countries of the world. They are going to put in place the back end, the social credit system that will regulate what you can spend, how much you can spend, where you can spend it, what you can spend it on. And I showed you some things from one of the organizations working with the World Economic Forum, and they were saying by 2030 they don't want anybody to consume any meat. And that does have a prophetic aspect to it, because it says in the New Testament that in the last days, one of the things they will do, forbidding to marry, and maybe the forbidding to marry will, the application in this day and age will be, we'll make it so you don't want to get married, because you don't even know what the sex is of the person that you might marry, and you're not going to be able to eat meat. And that's clearly said in scripture. And now you have whole organizations that are designed to get you not to eat meat. My wife and I went shopping today. We found some New York strip steaks at a local market. It's a national market, but they were on sale for $6 a pound, which is pretty good for New York strip steaks. So we bought some and got home, and we were talking about, once you cut the fat and stuff off, what the meat you actually paid about $6.40 a pound for it. And I said, well, then I guess our training, Pam, is complete, because we bought New York strip steaks for $6.40 a pound, and we think we got a steal. We think that was a really good deal. And so we're getting trained to accept these higher prices. So the central bank digital currencies, I don't know how quickly they're going to roll out. You can see here from the article on the Wall Street Journal. This is dated. It was in the yesterday's Wall Street Journal on the 17th. 114 countries are exploring digital currencies, and their collective economies represent more than 95% of the world's GDP. According to Atlantic Council's central bank central bank digital currency tracker. Some countries have already rolled out digital currencies or in a pilot program. Others are getting close. The US looks like it's probably going to be mid-year, just because it's pretty complicated. But they're coming, and you need to prepare for it. But it says here, that the problem that they're coming up with is that this is going to be so comprehensive that I don't know that they're going to get the systems in place. And so there's going to be disruption. So, for example, there was a big disruption at Bank of America today with a payment service that they use, that a lot of merchants use, and that's all messed up. Now, Bank of America has come out and said, well, we're going to get everything squared away in the next few days. But there's a lot of people leaving Bank of America because they're upset with the way things are going. So, that's central bank digital currency. So I'm going to close those down, and then I'm going to talk about this. So let me. This is what I was going to talk about with the Bill King. So let me set this up. So back in June, on June 8th, a very interesting article came out. Now, one of the things we talk about that seems to be part of the end times is some sort of peace agreement between Israel and the neighboring parties. There's not a specific roadmap as to how that works out, in my opinion. I think there are some indicators. For example, I personally think that Psalm 83 is an indicator of people who want to make an agreement of peace with Israel, but it's not. It's a fake out move. It's a move to fake out Israel. And so I believe I have grave concerns about the Abraham Accords and where they're going. But so back in June of last year, of course, now you got to remember Netanyahu's out of office. Yair Lapid is not yet prime minister. I think it might have been in July that he became prime minister. Naftali Bennett had been prime minister for about 6 months after the elections. Al Arabiya came out with this article. This was June 8th of this year, and it said exclusive, the Netanyahu doctrine. Nope, this is not the right article. This is the article, the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine. And this was written, this guy, Ali Shahabi, is associated with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And essentially he was making a proposal that one of the ways to resolve the situation between Israel and the Palestinians and all of the Arab countries is for there to be this thing called the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine. So some of the people who followed up, there's a guy named David Singer who's written quite a bit about it in some of the blogs at Times of Israel and some other places. And he's a big pusher that this is going to be a great thing. This is the way to solve it. And you can see here from the article, it says the basically insurmountable power imbalance between the Arabs and Israelis, let alone between the Palestinians and Israelis, argues for a radical rethinking of the approach to solving the Palestine problem. So this is what this article talked about, and it may have had the approval of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Very interesting development. But was even more interesting, so this article appears on June 8th. On June 9th, in the Wall Street Journal, is an article called A Jordanian Future for the West Bank. So here comes an article about the same subject the next day in the Wall Street Journal from a whole different guy, an essay, Shlomo Ben Ami, writing about this. And he talks about maybe we need a different radical approach to solving this peace issue in the Middle East. So here are two articles, Al Arabiya on June 8th, Wall Street Journal on June 9th, talking about a proposed way to resolve this issue. And what the way was, this is a map from the Trump plan that was released in January of 2020, released the day that in the afternoon, the White House focus shifted to a whole different topic, the Charlie Vector 019er thing, literally hit the fan on the day that this was released in January of 2020. So this is released in the morning, and within hours, the White House is in a complete turmoil about how to deal with the Charlie Vector 019er problem. Travel bans, all this stuff. What are we going to do? So what the proposal was, now they didn't, this Hashemite kingdom of Palestine and the Jordan option did not really reference the Trump plan, but what it took was an older plan from about 50 years ago that was proposed. And it seems to me also that there was an agreement where something along this line was proposed called the London Agreement in 1988, kind of came from Prince Charles and the British. It was actually signed by King Hussein of Jordan, but because it didn't become implemented, he got upset and eventually said, we don't want anything more to do with Palestine. We're leaving the West Bank. We're going back across the Jordan River, even though now the Jordanian ambassador to the UN is saying, well, we never did anything west of the Jordan River, which is just a big fat lie. But what the proposal is that this area of the West Bank, Judea and which is Judea and Samaria, some of the land will be given to the for Jewish settlements, and then these enclaves will be made part of what they call the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine, which will be administered by the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. That's the proposal. Now there are but some of the land will be excluded. For example, the land along the Jordan Valley, and this is where it kind of squares with the Trump plan, will be given to Israel. Netanyahu has essentially come out and said, well, I might agree to this, but we have to have complete security control in this area, which is, I mean, look at what's going on there right now with all the attacks and that sort of thing. So that it's just kind of interesting that these articles in Al Arabiya and the Wall Street Journal appear a couple years after the Trump Vision for Peace plan, but it uses sort of the basics of the Trump peace plan. Now, look, this in my view, this whole idea is insane. I know people want peace. I know people in Israel that seem to be receptive to a plan like this. I personally don't think it'll work. And it will also, the high line here in the mountains of Israel, in Judea and Samaria, will be given over, and that's the watershed for Israel. Water's a big deal in the Middle East. So I don't think it ultimately will work long term, but this is what is happening. So today, Caroline Glick has an article in that just came out in Newsweek, and the title of the article is Saudi Arabia's Challenge to Biden, Let's Abandon FDR's Deal with Ibn Saud. And this is an interview that she did for the Middle East Forum. I think that's Daniel Pipe's group. You can go and listen to it. The link is in the show notes. I'm going to play just a short clip of it because I want you to hear just a little bit of what she said, and then I'll talk about it. So here's a little clip of Caroline Glick talking on the Middle East Forum. Now I have to share this a different way. Excuse me one second. Share screen. Okay, so here's Caroline Glick. This is a few minutes into her discussion
of U.S.-Israel relations, because I would argue that the Arab-Israel conflict didn't begin on May 15th, 1948, when Israel declared its independence. it was invaded by a pan-Arab force from 5 different countries or 7 different countries, depending on how you count. It actually began that day because the United States gave the Arabs a green light effectively to reject the incipient Jewish state and to die in order to fight and destroy it. And what was interesting about that was that in 12 successive U.S. administrations, the president of the United States essentially kept FDR's word to Ibn Saud in the sense that they never, the United States' policy was always to accept the legitimacy of the Arabs' rejection of the Jewish state's right to exist. And not only that, at least from the time of Richard Nixon, the United States adopted policies that effectively placed the existence of the Arab conflict with the state of Israel, the Arab rejection of the state of Israel, on Israel. It said that Israel was blamed for it because of the absence of a Palestinian Arab state in land west of the Jordan River that Israel controlled. So that they adopted the Arab view, the Arab narrative, that there is something inherently illegitimate about the Jewish state in the land of Israel, that the Arabs are right to reject it, and that the onus for peacemaking was on the Jews and not on the Arabs, and that the Jews had to prove their worthiness of peace by appeasing the Palestinian Arabs who live west of the Jordan River. And the first time that we saw a departure from that in U.S. policy was under President Trump, when President Trump embraced Israel as an ally, recognized Israel's capital city of Jerusalem, moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, and did a number of other things that indicated that the U.S. policy was no longer to treat Israel's legitimacy as conditional on other people's acceptance of it, namely the Palestinians, but rather that it was intrinsic to the very nature of the Jewish state. And I would argue that part of the reason that Donald Trump, who initially, when he came into office and really for the first 3 years of his presidency, was pushing very hard for Israel to make concessions to the Palestinians, the reason that that position changed more or less in the last year of his presidency, and we saw it, we saw the capstone of that change in the signing of the Abraham Accords between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain at the White House, and then later Sudan and Morocco joined them, was because the Arabs had already abandoned Ibn Saud's view of Israel. It wasn't the United States that instigated the building of partnerships, strategic partnerships against Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood between the Gulf Arab states and Egypt and Israel. It was the Arabs themselves who saw that Israel, in the absence of a strong U.S., with Obama seeking to reach an accommodation with Iran that legitimized its nuclear weapons program and its hegemonic designs on the region, the Arabs realized that their best ally was actually the state of Israel. The strongest bar to Iran asserting hegemonic powers that endangered their very existence was the state of Israel. And so they were the ones who abandoned Ibn Saud's assessment of Israel. The Saudis under Mohammed bin Salman actually led the way, and they facilitated and enabled the normalization of ties between the UAE and Bahrain, Morocco and Sudan and the Jewish state.
So what she goes on to say, and you can get this in her article. Let me go back to the article here so I can discuss it a little bit more. Okay. So her article is talking about this. So what you see now, though, is you see this rapprochement beginning to happen between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And in fact, I should have played this before I switched the screens. I'm not trying to make you sick. back while he was forming his government in December. This, I think, actually happened while I was in Israel. Netanyahu gave a series of interviews. One of those interviews was with Al Arabiya Network. And here's a little bit of what Netanyahu said in that particular interview about what his goal was. And when he went to the Knesset to form his government around December 25th or so, and they were sworn in, this is what he said. He said, this is the most important things in my administration are going to be stop Iran, peace with Saudi Arabia. Here's what he had said a couple weeks before in an interview with Al Arabiya.
In Israel, to have the same opportunities to partake in the remarkable success story that is Israel. And therefore, I've encouraged that and will continue to encourage that.
So they're going to ask him about the settlements and how we're going to make this into a two-state solution. And Mahmoud Abbas is saying, I'm not going to do this. And so they're asked.
Well, I think he keeps on saying that. But in fact, the reason we've not had an Israeli-Palestinian peace is because the Palestinians have refused to do, and I think tragically, their leadership for the last century has refused to do what is finally happening in the rest of the Arab world, and that is to recognize that the state of Israel is here to stay. I think coming to a solution with the Palestinians will require out-of-the-box thinking. It will require new thinking. The reason we got the historic Abraham Accords is that we got out of this mode that seems to me Mahmoud Abbas wants to stay in, and that is to mouth the same lines, to go through the same rabbit's hole, not to seek new ways. In fact, it's when we started thinking about things in a new way that we broke the cycle of paralysis of peace that that paralyzes for a quarter of a century. Now, I think paradoxically, I don't think it's paradoxical, but other people do, that as we expand the number of countries that make peace with us, it actually helps bring about at the end a resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian problem. Everybody said, no, first you have to solve the Palestinian problem, otherwise you won't get peace with the Arab world. I said it may be the other way around. It may be that as you expand the peace with the Arab states, you'll be able to actually get to the peace with the Palestinians, and I firmly believe that.
So this is where Netanyahu wants to go. By the way, this is kind of an interesting thing. This is one thing I noticed. This is the city of Jerusalem behind Netanyahu. And what do you see here? You see over here in this one quadrant. So when I would come out from my hotel was a mile or so from the old city. But as you came into the old city and you looked to the west up the hill, like where the Jerusalem Municipal Building was, you see all these giant construction cranes. So in this quadrant of the city, when I just stopped and counted, and I think I counted 25 or 30 giant construction cranes. So, I mean, there's a lot going on in Israel. I mean, the economy is growing, it's booming. They now have the 8th most powerful military in the world for a country of 9 million people. It's kind of a pretty incredible thing. So Netanyahu wants to make peace with Saudi Arabia. So back to Caroline's article. So she's saying this, listen, so she makes reference then to a article that was in the January 5th Jerusalem Post by a guy named John Hannah. Here's the article. This is what it looked like when it appeared. Making Peace with the Saudis. It's on page, now it's in the comment section. I think it's page 11 of the Making Peace with the Saudis by a guy named John Hannah. Making peace with the Saudis, but not without Biden. Hannah was a national security advisor to Dick Cheney. And what happened was he's Jewish, and he wrote for the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, JINSA. And he wrote an article about a meeting that he and others had had with people, high up people in the Saudi government, including, my understanding is, Mohammed bin Salman. And to give him credit, Joel Rosenberg at I think it's allisrael.com, did an article about it, and you can find a YouTube video that he did where he interviewed John Hanna, who told about what he did. So here's in Caroline's article. So they went to Saudi Arabia. They meet with high up people, and one of the people in the Saudi government, Hanna quotes. Now he doesn't name the official because they're trying to be diplomatic about it, but he says this is what a Saudi official said just less than 2 weeks ago when they met. It makes sense for us to normalize with Israel. We share the same threats, enemies, and allies, but it will be difficult because for 50 years we filled our people's heads with hatred of Israel. We still have extremists. They will attack us. The Iranians will stir up instability. Our economy could suffer. Our standing as the leader of the Islamic world could suffer. The risks are real. We're prepared to take them, but we need several things from the United States first to help us balance the risks. So you see what is coming about here is this tripartite attempt to achieve peace with Israel. And when this is peace with Israel, it is very possible that it will be peace with all Arabs with Israel. And I think it will include all of those countries that are listed in Psalm 83. And so now, all Arabs doesn't mean Turkey, okay? Because Turkey's a big deal in this. And you see Turkey making all kinds of agreements now with Syria, with trying to get peace with Syria, trying to work things out with their concern about the Kurds, working with Iran and Russia to accomplish that. So you see that kind of other piece going on at the same time. So then Caroline goes on to say this in her article in Newsweek. Hanna then set out 3 Saudi officials' requests from the U.S., which, if met, would break the impasse and lead to peace. First, the Saudis are asking for a written agreement with the United States that sets out the U.S. commitment to Saudi security and defines America's strategic partnership with the kingdom. Now, right now, things are not going well between the U.S. and the Saudis. But the Saudis would like that. But the Saudis, they want to protect themselves. They have their interests. They have their diplomatic interests. But they want to make this peace with Israel. But they feel that they need the U.S. help. And I'm going to talk about what I think may be going on behind the scenes. But the Obama third administration is so intent on peace with the Palestinians that's completely cutting them, and they're not really talking with the Saudis. Tony Blinken and a bunch of delegations, they went to the Negev summit, which took place in the United Arab Emirates last week, and they just weren't doing anything that was going to benefit Israel. And Biden went to Saudi Arabia, and it was a major embarrassment. So that's the first thing, is let's get something in writing between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, and we'll make peace with Israel. Understand, this is where this is going, or where Saudis want it to go. The guys who are building this Babylon-like city of Neom, and I could show you pictures of what they're doing. You can see it coming together. It's happening fairly quickly. So second, despite Qatar's partnership, Qatar is Muslim Brotherhood, no good, and they bribe people to get the World Cup there. I mean, I think there's people going to jail in Europe because of that. Second, despite Qatar's partnership with Iran and sponsorship of the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, last March, the Biden administration designated Qatar as a major ally, a major non-NATO ally. The Saudis are asking for a similar designation. So our government, my government, not the one I voted for, but the one that's in charge, gave major non-NATO allies designation to Qatar. Qatar lets us use have a naval base there, and I think use some airfields. The Saudis want the same thing. And then the third thing that the Saudis want is they're asking the U.S. to develop a civil nuclear energy with them. And they say, listen, we have 7% of the world's known uranium reserves. We'd like to develop nuclear energy. And the Saudis can come out and say, well, that's nuclear energy is probably the greenest energy of all because there's no carbon, and we have uranium, and we want to develop this because maybe oil's going away. Maybe we'll run out of oil. So it's very interesting, the dynamics on this. And then there was this article today. So there was, so this is the Hannah article, and you can go to the Jerusalem Post and get that article, Making Peace with the Saudis by John Hannah. There was a series of articles here. There was one at Zero Hedge, and there was this from a few weeks ago that was talking about a Zero Hedge article. I put it up here because the Zero Hedge article is behind a paywall. And there's a guy named Zoltan Pozar, and what he was talking about in this article was the dusk of the petrodollar, the dawn of the petro-yuan. So that's where we go back to these countries that are developing central bank digital currencies. And the ones that are probably furthest down the road are the BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And what they're proposing, and in fact, Xi went to Saudi Arabia recently, and they supposedly entered into an agreement where they're going to be able to buy oil in something other than US dollars. Now, how far would they get with that or not? Because right now the US, because of this agreement with Ibn Saud, with FDR, and then pushed more when the US really became the reserve currency in about 1973, actually 50 years ago. Nixon, Kissinger, and like I said, Kissinger is 90. He'll be 100 in May, and they did an interview with him by video at the Davos just today. I think it was today. So, but they're talking about getting rid of this U.S. as the central reserve currency. Now, I don't know how serious the Saudis are. Part of me thinks that the Saudis are acting like they want to be part of this, getting rid of the petrodollar, but maybe they want peace with Israel because that's going to help them with the Iranian problem. So it may be that they're pushing for this, knowing that, well, at the last minute, they can say, okay, we'll continue with the petrodollar because you've helped us make peace with Israel, and you've included this, and you've helped us meet some of these conditions that we want to make peace with Israel. And it also says in Hannah's article that if the U.S. agrees to these conditions, there will be peace in a month. Okay, now factor that in. Okay, so factor this into the converging of all the stuff that's going on. And so I think that this is a pretty significant development. Now, at the same time that this is going on, Israel has major internal problems. This is Thursday's Jerusalem Post. Of course, it's already Thursday there. It comes out about 7 or 8 o'clock here in Ohio every night for the next day. So if I talk about it, it's not because I'm prescient or prophetic or anything like that. It's just that, that's the time difference. But there was this ruling today by the Israeli Supreme Court. So understand that in Israel right now, there's a major controversy. There were tens of thousands of people in protest in Haifa and Tel Aviv last weekend protesting a proposed law of the new Israeli government. The new Israeli government, if you'll remember, it's consists of the Likud coalition and then essentially a series of conservative religious Zionist parties, some of which are all ultra-Orthodox. And what three of the parties did was they ran together in the election, and now they've split apart. And they split apart because then they can get their people in the different ministerships. But this guy, Ari Dar, was appointed as the health and interior minister. He had been convicted of something last year. I don't know if it was a tax charge or something like that. And this is what happens to Israel. Everybody can say they're corrupt, but then everybody gets charged with a crime, and everybody has to withdraw. Or if judges get going the wrong way, they seem to get charged with crimes. But then they sort of come back to the reservation to support the influence of the courts in Israeli society, and suddenly the charges disappear. The whole system's pretty corrupt, and they've worked themselves into where the government, the Supreme Court, the judges have, in my view, way too much power. And so they always say, "Oh, this is you're tearing down democracy." So the party that Naftali Bennett was part of had proposed a law that was even more restrictive on the courts when he was running a few years ago under the Yamina party flag. So then now he's changed his mind. Oh, this is a threat to democracy. Everything's going to fall apart if we do this. So this guy is from the Shas party. It's a conservative religious party, and he's been appointed health and interior minister. The Supreme Court today ruled that in a 10-1 decision that because of his prior conviction, he cannot serve as a minister. And his party has come out and said, now the question is Netanyahu going to fire him or not? Is he going to follow what the court said? Now, they have this legislation pending to restrict the court's ability to overturn laws. Now, the question is, if they pass that, is the court going to overturn that law? The whole thing is just completely out of control. That's my opinion. The court is leftist, and you can imagine what the leftists are doing. They're the leftists there are like the leftists here. If their lips are moving, they're usually lying, that sort of thing. So they've said Dari cannot be a minister. Now the question is Netanyahu going to fire him? And then Shas came out today and said, if Netanyahu fires us, we withdraw from the coalition. If they withdraw from the coalition, I believe that will turn Netanyahu's majority into a 60-60 votes, and the government, they would go to further elections. So here's Netanyahu. He's not even been in power just a couple of weeks, 3 weeks maybe, and the government may fail. Now, I don't know if it will. I'm just saying is everything in this massive turmoil over there about this. So it's something that needs to be watched. And there'll be some developments over there. I'm sure I'm going to be talking about this. So a lot of stuff going on. And this Netanyahu is the one who wants to push this with Saudi Arabia. And he seems to be on track for that. But the U.S. is resisting because the U.S. is so pro-Palestinian. What Netanyahu did, for example, the Palestinians went and got when Ben Gvir went up to the Temple Mount, which would have been January 4th, 2 weeks ago yesterday. That ended up 2 days later at the UN Security Council. Like the UN Security Council doesn't have there's no other problems in the world that they have to devote 3 or 4 hours to dealing with a Jewish guy going to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. I mean, it's crazy. But the UN had also referred Israel because of the occupation to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. So what Netanyahu did was he came in and he said, look, we're cutting off money to the Palestinians because the Palestinians are paying this money to the families of people who are sitting in prison for terrorist acts and we're just cutting them off. And so that's another area of turmoil. And now the Supreme Court comes out and says, well, this guy can't serve in the government because he was convicted of something. Even though, for all I know, he did his time. But I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the Israeli law says, that whether he can run or not. But this is what they do. They're creating the narrative. They're taking people out of office that have been elected. So then you have the central bank, or you have the petrodollar issue that the Saudis seem to be siding with China on right now, China and Russia. But are they siding with China and Russia because they want to force the U.S. to help them get this peace achieved with Israel? It's a very interesting thing and has a lot of prophetic implications. So I think I'm going to wrap that up. I'm going to check here real quick and see if I have any questions that I can see. And again, I apologize, the Bill was not able to be with us tonight, but his travel schedule just didn't permit. So, question here. See if I can show this one. Let me stop the screen. What will happen if the Saudis end the petrodollar? Well, it won't be just the Saudis ending the petrodollar. It will be a shift in the world. There's a good chance that this is going to happen. I mean, the U.S. Being the reserve currency in the world is probably a longer period of time than anybody has ever had before. And it's very beneficial to the United States. It makes our money worth things. If it goes away, it will have a huge impact on our lifestyles here in the United States. We can say that our government is corrupt and all this other stuff and doesn't do the right thing all the time. I agree 100% with that. But I personally, from my own personal comfort standpoint, living in the country that is the world's reserve currency has some discernible benefits to it. If it goes away, there will be big changes here in the United States. Lifestyles will move down very quickly. That's what I think. Let me see if there's any other. Who are the very elect mentioned in Matthew? Tell you what, I'm going to save that one for another time, because I don't want to be here for 4 hours trying to explain that. Question: what happened to your midweek update from last week? Okay, from last week, you can send an email to johnhaller@fvchapel.com, and I'll send you the link to it. The audio got messed up, and there was a buzz, and I didn't have time to go in and edit it. And so I just thought I unlisted it. It's still there, but it's just, you have to have the link to find it. It's, and there was about a 10-minute gap in there, and I apologize. I just don't have time. It's something happened to the audio, and my staff here, which is me, I might've hit a cable or something like that, because I use my hands like a crazy man sometimes, but I'm not sure. So anyway, it's there if you know where to look. So if you want to send me an email, johnhaller@fvchapel.com, I will try to send you the link. Understand, I might take me a couple days to get to it, because I cleaned 20,000 emails out of my account recently. And 15,000 of them are back in less than 2 weeks. So I'm trying to get through that. I don't know. I may just declare email bankruptcy and delete them all. Anyway, by the way, this is I would agree with this from DirtNap, Joe Schimmel's Trump Satanic Peace Plan. I think it squares with a lot of what I said. Also, by the way, let me just clear this up. So I'm not going to be speaking in Scotland in March. The sort of a mutual decision that it just didn't make sense for me to go for a one-day conference, but I will be going to speak at a Moriel residential conference the last time I was there, I guess it was back in 2018. They had a Christian center that they rented, and people could come and stay there. I think we had like 400 people there or something like that. That's going to be around June 16th to the 18th. So I'm probably going to go over a little bit early for the conference. So, you can contact me at johnhaller@fbchapel.com and john.haller at fbchapel.com. And I'll try to respond to you. So if there's people want to make arrangements, maybe come meet with a group or speak at your church. I know there's one church I'm talking to already for the weekend prior to the June 16th, if that can be worked out. But I'll be there other days. And if anybody wants to take me to, I don't know, up to St. Andrews or something like that, you can get a 5-hour prophecy conference there if you do that. And then early May, the first weekend in May, I'm going to be doing a conference. At least this is the plan right now. Things could change. Last Days Bible Conference. I did a virtual one for them 2 years ago. Back in 2021, I think one of my talks was Deplatforming Humanity. And I think I did one on the Enneagram. And that's going to be in the Calgary, Alberta area. I don't think the details have been released other than the date. So it's going to be in the Calgary area. They had rented a place in Olds to use, or they made arrangements to do a place in Olds, and there was an auditorium there that sat like 2,000 people. And with the Charlie Vector restrictions that were in place at the time, they were only going to be allowed to have 75 people in the auditorium. And so it just didn't make economic sense to do that. But hopefully that's going to be done in the first weekend in May of this year in Calgary, Canada. Those are just some of the things I got going on in the next few months. And so I think I'm going to terminate this now. I appreciate you listening. And again, I apologize for Bill not being able to be here. We're going to talk about trying to get him here soon. So anyway, so God bless. Thank you. And I appreciate so much you listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. It helps us all out. Thank you.